Every choice you make costs you something. Not just the big, scary ones, not just the ones that keep you up at night. Every single one, including the choice to sit on your hands and do nothing. People like to think that doing nothing is some kind of safe middle ground. Like if you just don't decide, you've somehow beaten the system. But that's not how it works, and honestly, most people already know that. If you never plant anything, don't act surprised when harvest time rolls around and you've got nothing. You're always paying for the life you're living. That's not me being harsh. It's just how it is. The only real question is when you pay and what you get back. When you put in the work now, when you learn, build, push through the uncomfortable stuff. Yeah, that costs you. But you're getting something real in return. You're trading your time and energy for skills, for options, for a future that actually looks different from where you started. That's a trade worth making. But when you duck the work, when you pick comfort over growth, easy over hard, familiar over necessary, you're still paying. You're just paying with a worse exchange rate. The price of doing nothing shows up as missed chances. And that's one of the quieter tragedies out there, because missed chances don't announce themselves. They don't knock on your door and say, "Hey, I was here and you weren't ready." They just leave. The opportunity that was sitting there last year might not be there this year. The window that was wide open in your 20s might be barely cracked by your 40s. The relationship, the business idea, the perfect moment, none of that waits around forever while you get your act together. So the person who keeps hesitating and putting things off isn't just standing still. They're falling behind where they could have been, and that gap gets wider every season they let slip by. Doing nothing also costs you options. This one sneaks up on you, but it's just as real. If you don't build a skill, your choices in life get smaller. If you don't grow your knowledge, you can only solve so many problems, and the opportunities that come your way shrink to match. If you don't invest in your relationships, you end up without the kind of trust and goodwill that opens doors. Options don't just get handed out equally to everyone. They pile up for people who invest in themselves, and they quietly vanish for people who don't. Someone with a bunch of developed abilities can go in a lot of directions. Someone who's invested in nothing, they've got very few paths left, and the ones that remain usually aren't great. And then there's the cost you can never get back: time. Pretty much everything else in life has some chance of a do-over. You can make money again. Relationships can sometimes be fixed. Health can improve. But time only goes one way. Once a day is gone, it's gone for good. That's why the habit of saying someday is so quietly destructive, because someday never actually shows up on a calendar. There's no date circled in red. There's just today and whatever you do with it, and then tomorrow, which asks the same question all over again. The person who really gets this doesn't become anxious about it. They become intentional. They start looking at their days not as something to get through, but as something to invest. When you start seeing this clearly, your decisions start to feel different. Not heavier in a stressful way, but heavier in a meaningful way. You start to realize that spending an evening doing nothing worthwhile isn't neutral. It has a price tag. You start to see that skipping the hard conversation, dodging the discipline, settling for less than what you're capable of, none of that is free. There's a ledger somewhere, and everything gets written down. The person who wakes up at 50 wondering how their life ended up this way didn't get there by accident. They got there through thousands of small choices that each seemed like no big deal at the time, but added up to the life they're living now. Here's what shifts when you truly accept this. Since you're always paying no matter what, the question stops being whether to pay and becomes what you want to pay for. That's a way more useful question. Do you want to pay now? In effort, discipline, the discomfort of growing, the humility of learning? Or do you want to pay later in limitations, regret, and the quiet frustration of knowing you had more in you than you ever used? Both payments are real. You can't dodge either one. But only one of them gives you something worth having. The cost of discipline is always cheaper than the cost of regret. And the person who gets that stops treating hard work like something to escape and starts treating it like the smartest investment they can make. There's something else worth mentioning about the link between your choices and how you feel about yourself. When you make the harder choice, when you do what you said you'd do, when you follow through even when it'd be easy not to, something builds up inside you. Not just skill or progress, but a sense that you can count on yourself. A quiet confidence that comes from keeping the promises you make to yourself. And when you don't make those choices, when you take the easy road too often, something else builds up instead. A nagging doubt about whether your word means anything. A slow erosion of trust in yourself when it matters. That's another hidden cost of avoidance, and it's one of the biggest. The direction you pick today is building the person you'll be 5 years from now. That's not a metaphor. It's just mechanics. The habits you form, the standards you keep, the effort you put in or don't, all of it is quietly assembling the future you. And that future version has to live with the choices being made right now. They'll have the abilities you chose to develop, or they'll be missing the ones you chose to skip. They'll have the relationships you invested in, or they'll deal with the loneliness that comes from neglect. They'll have the financial stability your discipline created, or the financial stress your avoidance caused. You're not just making choices for today, you're making them for every version of yourself that hasn't shown up yet. So the challenge isn't finding a way to escape the cost. That escape doesn't exist. The challenge is being honest enough to see the cost clearly and smart enough to choose which price you're willing to pay. The person who looks at their situation honestly, who stops pretending that doing nothing is free, who stops acting like avoidance is neutral, that person is ready to start making better choices. They're ready to start trading their time and effort for things that actually matter. And when that shift happens, even in small ways, the direction of a life starts to change. Not overnight and not without continued effort, but it changes, and it's real. There's a principle behind every ability you'll ever build, and it's simpler than most people want to hear. What you repeat becomes what you can do, not what you try once during a burst of motivation, not what you attempt on a particularly focused weekend when the stars align and you feel ready. What you come back to consistently, long enough that it stops feeling weird and starts feeling normal. That's what actually becomes yours. That's what becomes part of how you operate. And the flip side is just as true. What you quit on, what you start and stop, what you visit now and then but never commit to, that stays just out of reach. Always something you could do in theory but never quite pull off reliably. Most people have the wrong idea about how skills get built. They think the secret ingredient is intensity. That if they just push hard enough in one big burst, something will click and the ability will stick. And yeah, intensity matters. But intensity without repetition is like one rainstorm in a drought. It helps, but it doesn't solve the problem. The ground soaks up what it can and the rest runs off, and a few days later, you'd barely know it rained. Skills work the same way. One big push gives you some results, but those results fade fast if you don't reinforce them. The ability doesn't take root until you've come back to it enough times that your mind and body start recognizing the pattern, start anticipating what's needed, start responding more from instinct than calculation. What repetition really does at its core is get rid of hesitation. This is one of the most underrated things about consistent practice. When you're doing something for the first or second or even fifth time, there's a layer of hesitation baked into everything. You're not just doing the task, you're also managing your uncertainty about the task. You're doing the thing while simultaneously asking yourself if you're doing it right, if you're missing something, if the next step is what you think it is. That inner questioning eats up energy, slows you down, and causes mistakes that aren't really about being bad at it. They're about being unfamiliar with it. As you repeat the task, that questioning gets quieter. Not because you've stopped thinking, but because you don't need to think about the parts you've already absorbed. Your brain power gets freed up for the stuff that still needs attention, and your performance gets better, not because you've become a different person, but because you've cleared out the friction. Think about anything you do today without really thinking about it, and trace it back to when it was brand new. There was a time it took your full concentration. There was a time you made mistakes you don't make anymore. When you had to slow down for steps you now breeze through. That change didn't happen because of talent. It happened because of repetition. You did it enough that it became part of your wiring. And here's what that means for everything you currently struggle with. The thing that feels hard today isn't necessarily going to feel hard forever. The difficulty might not be your ceiling. It might just be where you are in the repetition cycle. You haven't done it enough times yet for the hesitation to fade and the control to kick in. That's why one of the most important decisions you can make is choosing carefully what you're willing to repeat. Because repetition doesn't pick and choose what it builds. It builds whatever you feed it. Repeat productive habits and it builds productive capacity. Repeat avoidance and it builds a really well-developed ability to avoid. Repeat excuses and it builds a fluency with excuses that eventually runs on autopilot. Repeat precision, care, and follow-through, and it builds a character that naturally expresses those things without much effort. The process doesn't judge whether what you're repeating is good for you. It just reinforces whatever you keep doing. That means the person who's spent years repeating bad habits has built something, just not something useful. And the person who's spent years repeating disciplined behavior has also built something. And what they've built gives them an edge that can't be taken away overnight. There's also a side of repetition that people rarely talk about, and that's what it does to your relationship with hard things. When you first hit something challenging, the difficulty feels huge because it's unfamiliar. And the unfamiliar always carries a certain weight that has nothing to do with how hard the task actually is. It feels hard partly because you don't know it yet. But as you keep coming back to it, the difficulty doesn't necessarily go away. It just becomes familiar difficulty. And familiar difficulty is way more manageable than the unknown kind. You start to figure out where the hard parts actually are. You learn which steps need your full attention and which ones you can cruise through. You build a mental map of the challenge that lets you navigate it more efficiently. And eventually, what once felt like a wall starts to feel like a familiar road with some hills. Still takes effort, but it stops catching you off guard. There's a word for what happens when enough repetition has stacked up and the hesitation has faded and the control has kicked in. Competence. Real competence. Not faking it, not looking like you know what you're doing, actually being able to do it reliably under different conditions without needing everything to be perfect. Competence is what separates the person who can perform when everything's ideal from the person who can still deliver when they're tired, under pressure, and things aren't going their way. And competence is built through one thing above all else, showing up for it over and over. There's no shortcut that gets you the same result, no substitute that builds the same foundation. Now here's where it gets personal. Most people quit before repetition has had a chance to do its thing. They start something. They hit the difficulty that comes with being new at it. They don't see the improvement they were hoping for right away, and they decide it's not working, or that they're just not cut out for it. So they stop. Then, a while later, the motivation comes back and they start again, and the cycle repeats. Start, stop, start again. Never sticking around long enough for the repetition to stack up into real ability. The result is a life full of beginnings and very few things that actually went anywhere. Full of stuff they've tried and almost nothing they've gotten good at. The frustration from that pattern is real and totally understandable, but the problem isn't a lack of talent. The problem is leaving before the compound interest of repetition has had time to pay off. Sticking with something long enough is its own kind of discipline, and it takes a specific type of patience. Not passive patience, not just sitting around waiting for results. Active patience. The kind that keeps you showing up and doing the work, even when the feedback is slow, the progress isn't visible yet, and the whole thing still feels awkward and unnatural. That kind of patience is rare, and that's exactly why the people who have it tend to build abilities that set them apart. When most people have already bailed, the person with active patience is still at it. And the buildup from that continued effort is what eventually produces results that look, from the outside, like some kind of natural gift. What you choose to repeat consistently, you'll eventually understand deeply. What you understand deeply, you can apply with confidence. What you apply with confidence, you can build on. And what you build on becomes the foundation for the next level. That's the architecture of real growth. It doesn't happen randomly and it doesn't happen fast, but it happens with surprising reliability when you stay with it long enough. The question worth sitting with isn't whether you have the talent for what you want to achieve. It's whether you're willing to repeat the necessary work long enough for the talent to develop. Because for most things that matter in life, that willingness is where the real difference gets made. There's something that gets left out of almost every conversation about hard work, and it's this. Effort by itself isn't enough. That's a tough thing for some people to hear, because effort feels virtuous, and it is virtuous. But being virtuous doesn't guarantee results. The person who works hard in the wrong direction doesn't get rewarded just because they worked hard. Life doesn't grade on effort alone. It grades on outcomes, and outcomes are shaped not just by how much you put in, but by where you aim what you put in. Direction isn't some minor detail in the equation. It's one of the main variables, and when it's wrong, no amount of extra effort fixes it. Extra effort in the wrong direction just takes you further from where you want to be, faster. Think about what it actually means to aim wrong and then work harder. You're not canceling out the problem with your effort. You're making it worse. Every hour invested in the wrong direction builds more distance between you and where you actually want to go. And the tricky part is that hard work in the wrong direction often feels productive while it's happening. You're busy, you're tired at the end of the day, you're putting in the hours, and all of that creates the feeling of progress even when you're really moving sideways or backward. This is one of the more painful realizations a person can have, looking back and seeing that years of genuine effort were pointed somewhere that was never going to produce what they actually wanted. Not because they lacked discipline, but because they never paused long enough to seriously question the direction. Where you aim your time is where your life goes. That sounds almost too obvious to bother saying, but don't let the simplicity fool you. Your time is the most limited resource you've got, and where you consistently point, it shapes your future with almost mathematical precision. The person who consistently points their time at developing a skill will have that skill. The person who consistently points it at building a certain kind of relationship will have that relationship. The person who consistently points it at growing financially will see financial results. And the person who consistently points it at distraction, avoidance, and low-value stuff will get exactly what those directions produce. There's no mystery here. The direction of your time is the direction of your life, and you're always pointed somewhere, whether you chose that direction on purpose or just drifted into it. Attention works the same way. Where your attention consistently goes, your thinking develops. Where your thinking develops, your decisions get better. Where your decisions get better, your outcomes change. That's why managing your attention is one of the most powerful disciplines out there. The person who's learned to direct their attention on purpose, who can choose what to focus on instead of just reacting to whatever's loudest, has an advantage that compounds over time. Because attention isn't just a tool for getting stuff done in the moment. It's the mechanism that builds understanding, solves problems, and uncovers better approaches. When you control where your attention goes, you're controlling the quality of your thinking, and the quality of your thinking shapes every decision you make. Energy is the third piece. and it follows the same logic. You've got a limited supply of energy each day. Every bit you spend in one direction is energy you don't have for something else. So when you say yes to one thing, you're quietly saying no to something else, whether you realize it or not. The person spreading their energy across 10 things at once rarely makes real progress on any of them, because the energy is too spread out to build enough momentum in any single direction. But the person who's learned to focus their energy, who's picked a direction and invested in it with real consistency, starts to see what concentrated effort over time actually looks like. It looks like progress that other people can't quite explain, but there's nothing mysterious about it once you understand the principle. When the direction is wrong, working harder doesn't fix it. That needs to be said plainly, because there's a common assumption that when results aren't showing up, the answer is always to grind more. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes the problem isn't effort, it's aim. And in those cases, working harder without changing direction isn't a solution. It's accelerating down the wrong path. The honest, and sometimes uncomfortable question to ask when things aren't working isn't just, how much harder can I push? It's also, am I pushing in a direction that can actually get me where I want to go? That question takes a willingness to step back and evaluate, which is harder than just pushing forward, but it's way more useful when direction is the real issue. Adjusting direction is not the same as giving up, and it's important to be clear about that. There are people who change direction so often they never develop anything anywhere, and that's a real problem worth talking about separately. But there are also people who stay on a path long after the evidence has made it obvious that the path can't get them where they need to go. And they stay not out of discipline, but because they don't want to face the possibility that they've been aimed wrong. Discipline pointed in the wrong direction is still misdirected effort. Being loyal to an approach that isn't working isn't a virtue when the approach itself is the problem. Knowing when to adjust your aim is just as important as knowing how to keep grinding, and the two don't conflict with each other when your head is on straight. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit the direction needs to change, and then actually change it. Here's what changes when the direction is right. Even modest effort starts producing useful results. That's one of the most encouraging things about getting your aim right. It means you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be extraordinary. You don't have to be some tireless machine. You just have to be pointed the right way and put in steady, reasonable effort. When you're aimed correctly, the cumulative effect of that consistency starts showing up in your results in ways that feel way bigger than what you put in. That feeling isn't an illusion. It's what happens when your effort compounds because it's building in one clear direction instead of being scattered everywhere, or worse, pointed somewhere that was never going to give you what you wanted. There's also the matter of what you run into along the way, and direction determines that too. The people you meet, the problems you face, the lessons that become available, the opportunities that pop up. All of that is shaped heavily by the direction you're moving in. When you're headed toward a certain kind of work, you naturally cross paths with people doing that work. When you're headed toward a certain kind of growth, you naturally bump into the challenges that produce it. Life isn't totally predictable, but it's not totally random either. The direction you're moving in shapes the territory you pass through, and the territory you pass through shapes what becomes possible for you. Choosing your direction carefully is, in a very real way, choosing the kind of experiences and opportunities you're likely to encounter. You can't control every outcome, and it'd be foolish to pretend otherwise. There are variables in every situation that are out of your hands. Circumstances shift. Timing doesn't always cooperate. Results disappoint even when you gave it your best. That's real and worth acknowledging. But within all that uncertainty, the one thing you can control with real consistency is where you aim. You can choose where to point your time, your attention, and your energy. You can make that choice on purpose instead of letting it get made for you by habit or by whatever's screaming loudest on any given day. And that choice, made consistently over time, has more influence over what's possible for you than almost anything else. Direction is the variable you own most completely, and the person who understands that treats the choice of direction like it actually matters. There's a boundary in every person's life that doesn't show up on any map and isn't set by anyone else. It's the boundary defined by what they're willing to accept, not what they say they want, not the standard they claim when talking to other people, but what they actually let slide without correcting it, without responding to it, without doing anything about it. That boundary is real, and it acts as a ceiling on performance in every area where it's operating. You can have ambitions that reach way above that ceiling. You can talk about those ambitions openly and sincerely. You can genuinely believe in them. But as long as the ceiling is where it is, the ambitions above it stay out of reach. Not because you lack the ability, but because the standard you actually enforce in your daily life hasn't risen to match the standard you claim to be chasing. Most people don't set their ceiling on purpose. Nobody sits down one day and decides how much mediocrity they're okay living with. It happens gradually, through a bunch of small passes that each seem reasonable at the time. You let one thing slide because the situation was unusual. You accept a lower level of effort from yourself because you were tired, or distracted, or stressed. You tolerate a situation that deserves your attention because dealing with it feels uncomfortable and ignoring it seems manageable in the short term. Each of these little passes seems minor. But they're not small events that vanish once the moment is over. They're precedents, and precedents stack up into patterns, and patterns harden into what feels like the normal range of your behavior. And that normal range becomes the ceiling you operate under without even realizing it's a ceiling. This is how limits that feel permanent get built. Not through one dramatic failure or one decisive moment of weakness, but through the slow buildup of what you allowed. The person wondering why a certain area of their life has never improved, despite genuinely wanting it to, would benefit from asking a different question. Instead of asking why the results aren't there, ask what you've been consistently tolerating in that area. Ask what you've been letting continue that directly contradicts the result you say you want. Ask where you've been accepting less than you know is possible without making the fixes that would bring things back to where they need to be. The answers to those questions will tell you more about your ceiling than any analysis of talent or opportunity ever could. Small passes are especially dangerous because they're almost invisible when they first happen. When you make a big compromise, you tend to notice it. It feels significant, it registers as a departure from your standard, and even if you go through with it, you're aware you did. But small passes rarely trigger that kind of awareness. They slip past your internal checkpoint because they seem too minor to bother with. Why address something so small when there are bigger things to deal with? That logic makes sense in isolation. The problem is that small passes don't stay isolated. They connect to each other and reinforce each other, and over time they create a general atmosphere of going easy on yourself that becomes self-sustaining. The habit of letting small things go trains you to let things go, period. Eventually, the bar for what feels worth correcting rises to the point where real problems are sliding through without you doing anything about them. What you allow from yourself, you start to expect from yourself. That's the mechanism by which tolerances become ceilings. When you've let a certain level of performance stand uncorrected often enough, that level starts to feel normal. It stops feeling like you're falling short and starts feeling like that's just where you are. And once it feels normal, your internal alarm system stops going off. The discomfort that used to come with underperforming fades, not because the performance got better, but because your sense of what's acceptable quietly lowered itself to match what you've been allowing. That's one of the more subtle and serious costs of repeated tolerance. It doesn't just leave the problem in place, it rewires your ability to even recognize the problem as a problem. Here's what makes this especially worth understanding. The ceiling created by tolerance isn't some permanent structural feature of who you are. It's a behavioral thing, something built through repeated choices that can be changed through different choices. The person who spent years tolerating a certain level of performance isn't stuck there forever. They're stuck there for as long as they keep permitting it. The moment they start holding themselves to a genuinely different standard, and more importantly, the moment they start enforcing that standard consistently, the ceiling starts to move. Not instantly, and not without the friction that comes with breaking old patterns, but it moves. Because the ceiling was never made of something permanent. It was made of repeated passes, and passes can be replaced with corrections. Deciding that something is no longer acceptable is a powerful move, but it has to be followed by behavior that matches the decision. This is where a lot of people come up short. They make the decision, they feel the clarity and conviction of it, and they believe the decision itself has changed something. But a decision without consistent follow-up action is just a feeling. And feelings without matching action don't move ceilings. What actually moves the ceiling is the repeated act of catching yourself slipping and responding differently than you used to, of holding the line when the old pull toward tolerance kicks in. It's about proving to yourself through your behavior over time that the new standard is the one you actually live by, not just the one you announced. The announcement matters, but it's the follow-through that produces the change. There's a connection between what you tolerate and the respect you have for yourself, and it runs deeper than most people look. When you consistently let your own standards slip without correcting them, something wears away in your relationship with yourself. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that announces itself, but quietly and steadily. You start carrying a subtle sense that your commitments to yourself don't fully mean what they seem to mean. That the standards you set are negotiable in practice, even if they sound solid in principle. And that erosion doesn't stay contained to the one area where the tolerance is happening. It spreads a general uncertainty about your own word that bleeds into your confidence in other areas, that makes the next commitment feel a little less binding, that makes the next standard a little easier to let slide. Tolerances don't just affect the area they operate in, they affect the whole foundation of your self-trust. When you decide that certain things are no longer acceptable, and you prove it through your behavior, the opposite happens. Each time you catch the slip and correct it, each time you hold the standard when it'd be easier not to, you're building something more valuable than the specific improvement in that specific area. You're building evidence that your standards mean something, that your decisions carry weight, that when you commit to a level of performance, you'll actually maintain it. That evidence stacks up into a kind of self-trust that makes every future standard easier to hold, because you've shown yourself over and over that you're someone who follows through. The ceiling moves not just because the tolerance changed, but because the person doing the tolerating changed. What you refuse to accept ultimately shapes the person you're becoming, and it does so more precisely than almost anything else. Goals and intentions describe where you want to go, but the standards you enforce in your daily behavior describe where you're actually going. When those two are lined up, progress becomes almost inevitable. When they're misaligned, when your stated goals point one direction and your enforced standards point another, the standards win every time. They win because they're what you actually do. And what you actually do is what produces your actual results. The most important question isn't what you want to achieve. The most important question is what you're prepared to stop accepting. Because the answer to that will do more to shape your future than anything you've written on a goal sheet or announced to the people around you. slowly becomes visible. Craft that could eventually create value for others. That decision may not feel important in the moment because it does not immediately produce a visible reward. But when the same decision is repeated day after day, week after week, and year after year, it slowly builds an ability that did not exist before. Another person may decide to spend that same hour in a different way. They might choose the easiest activity available, something that requires no effort and demands no growth. That decision also seems harmless when it happens once. Yet, when that choice becomes a daily habit, it begins shaping the direction of a life just as strongly as the first example. The important thing to understand is that direction rarely announces itself while it is being formed. A person can spend years making decisions that seem insignificant without realizing those choices are slowly building a path that becomes harder to change as time goes on. Life tends to respond to patterns, and those patterns are created through repeated decisions. Think about the difference between planting a seed and ignoring the chance to plant one. When a seed is placed in the soil, nothing appears to happen right away. The ground looks exactly the same as it did before, and someone passing by might assume that nothing important took place. Yet beneath the surface, a process has quietly started. The same idea applies to the decisions someone makes with their time and effort. When a person chooses to learn something useful, practice discipline, or improve their understanding of the world, the results are not always visible right away. The process develops quietly, just like the seed beneath the soil. Months later, the person who kept planting those small decisions begins to notice something different about their life. Their abilities have grown, their understanding has expanded, and opportunities that once seemed far away begin appearing within reach. Those opportunities were not created in a single moment. They were built through many ordinary choices, repeated over time. Meanwhile, another person who believed daily decisions did not matter may find themselves in a very different position. They might look around and wonder why progress seems to happen for others while their own situation has stayed the same. The answer is often found in the accumulation of choices made quietly over many years. Direction does not need dramatic announcements. It simply requires repetition. When someone repeats useful decisions long enough, those choices begin shaping a path that gradually leads toward progress. When unproductive decisions are repeated long enough, they begin shaping a path that leads toward stagnation instead. This is why the small decisions of each day deserve attention. The hours spent improving a skill may not feel important today, but when repeated for several years, it can completely transform a person's abilities. The decision to think constructively about challenges may not change the day immediately, but over time it shapes how someone responds to life. Daily choices also influence what a person begins expecting from themselves. When someone repeatedly chooses actions that move them forward, they slowly develop the belief that progress is normal and possible. That belief encourages more action, which then produces more progress. On the other hand, when someone repeatedly chooses the easiest path available, they may gradually develop the expectation that effort and improvement are unnecessary. Over time, that belief can quietly limit what they attempt and what they believe they are capable of achieving. The direction of a life is not created by accident. It is created through the small decisions that are repeated often enough to become habits. Those habits guide behavior. Behavior shapes results. And results gradually determine the path a life begins to follow. What makes this idea powerful is the realization that every person has the ability to influence those choices. Each day presents opportunities to decide how time will be used. what kind of thinking will be encouraged, and what actions will be taken. While no one can control every circumstance that appears in life, everyone can influence the decisions they make in response. Over time, those responses become the quiet architects of the future. They build skills, shape character, and influence the kinds of results that begin appearing in a person's life. The difference between progress and regret rarely begins with a single dramatic decision. More often it begins with the ordinary choices that seem small while they are being made. A life moves in the direction of the decisions that are repeated most often. When those decisions support growth, responsibility, and improvement, progress slowly becomes visible. When those decisions avoid effort and delay meaningful action, stagnation slowly appears instead. Understanding this principle gives a person something valuable: awareness. The awareness that today's ordinary decisions are not isolated events, but part of a pattern that slowly shapes tomorrow. Once someone recognizes that truth, the small choices of each day begin to feel far more important. Every hour becomes an opportunity to guide the direction of the path ahead. Every decision becomes a seed that will eventually produce some kind of result. Whether those results lead toward progress or regret depends largely on the direction hidden within the choices repeated each day. One of the most common crossroads a person faces in life appears in a very ordinary way. It rarely arrives with a sign announcing that an important decision is being made, and it often feels so small that people hardly notice it while it's happening. The choice is simply this: whether to pursue comfort in the present moment or to pursue growth that may require effort and temporary discomfort. Comfort has a very convincing voice. It promises relief from effort, a break from responsibility, and the satisfaction of staying within familiar limits. It asks very little from someone in the present, and because of that, it often feels like the most reasonable choice available at the time. There's nothing inherently wrong with comfort. Rest is necessary, and every person needs moments when they can recover their strength and enjoy the rewards of their work. The problem begins when comfort becomes the default direction for daily decisions, rather than a short pause between periods of productive effort. Growth speaks in a different voice. It asks for learning, discipline, patience, and sometimes the willingness to struggle with something that does not come easily. The rewards of growth rarely appear right away, which is one reason many people hesitate when this choice appears. Think about someone who decides to learn a new skill. At the beginning, the process can feel awkward and frustrating. Mistakes happen often, progress looks slow, and the person may feel uncomfortable dealing with something they do not yet understand. At that moment, comfort offers a tempting alternative. It suggests stepping away from the difficulty and returning to something easier. It quietly suggests that effort can always begin tomorrow, when conditions feel more convenient and confidence feels stronger. If that suggestion is accepted once or twice, the consequences may seem small. Yet when the same decision is repeated again and again, something important begins to change. The person slowly trains themselves to avoid the very experiences that would have helped their abilities grow. Growth develops when someone stays engaged with the challenge long enough to learn from it. The early discomfort slowly turns into understanding, and what once felt difficult begins to feel manageable. Over time, the person who repeatedly chooses growth begins noticing their capabilities increasing. Skills improve, confidence expands, and opportunities that once seemed intimidating start looking achievable. None of this happens because growth suddenly became easy, but because the person chose to continue despite temporary discomfort. Comfort tends to keep someone exactly where they are. It protects the present moment, but often limits what becomes possible later. Growth asks more from the present moment, but it quietly expands what becomes possible in the future. Imagine two people starting at a similar point in life. Both have similar abilities and similar opportunities. One person chooses comfort whenever the decision appears, while the other repeatedly chooses the effort required to improve. In the beginning, their lives may look almost the same. The person choosing comfort enjoys the ease of the present, while the person choosing growth invests time and energy into learning and development. For a while, there may be little visible difference between them, but as the years pass, the results begin separating. The person who chose growth has built knowledge, experience, and capability that did not exist before. The challenges they once struggled with have become skills they can now handle with confidence. Meanwhile, the person who repeatedly chose comfort may find that their abilities have remained mostly unchanged. They might feel confused about why the distance between themselves and others has slowly grown. That separation was not created by a single dramatic moment. It was created by many small situations where someone chose either the ease of comfort or the effort required for growth. Each decision looked minor when it happened, yet together they formed a powerful pattern. Growth also builds confidence in a unique way. When someone repeatedly faces challenges and learns from them, they begin trusting their ability to deal with difficulty. They start believing that unfamiliar situations can be understood and handled with patience and effort. Comfort rarely provides that experience. It encourages someone to stay within familiar territory where little challenge exists. While that may feel safe in the present, it can quietly limit the confidence that comes from overcoming difficulty. There is an important truth hidden in this idea. Growth does not require perfection. A person does not need to succeed every time they attempt something difficult. What matters is the willingness to keep learning and improving through the process. Each time someone chooses growth, they gain experience that becomes valuable later. They learn what works, what does not work, and how to adjust when circumstances change. That knowledge slowly becomes an advantage that shapes future opportunities. The choice between comfort and growth appears many times throughout life. It shows up in small moments when someone must decide whether to learn something new, attempt something difficult, or stay within familiar limits. These moments often pass quietly, yet they carry enormous influence over the direction of a person's development. People who consistently choose growth may not see dramatic changes right away, but eventually they discover that their abilities have expanded far beyond what once seemed possible. Those who consistently choose comfort may enjoy the ease of the present, but later they sometimes realize that the future they hoped for never fully developed. The difference between those outcomes rarely begins with one decision. It begins with the repeated choice between comfort and growth, made quietly in the ordinary moments that shape the direction of a life. Another decision that quietly separates progress from regret is the choice a person makes about the standards they live by. Every person operates according to certain expectations, whether those expectations have been carefully chosen or simply absorbed from the environment around them. These standards influence how someone approaches their work, how they handle responsibility, and how seriously they treat the commitments they make. Standards act like an invisible line that determines what someone will accept from themselves. Some people place that line very low, expecting only minimal effort and average results. Others place that line much higher, expecting discipline, reliability, and steady improvement. Over time, those expectations begin shaping the quality of results that appear in a person's life. Someone who sets low standards may still work hard occasionally, but their effort often depends on their mood or the situation. If conditions are easy, they may perform well. If circumstances become difficult, their effort may quickly decline because their personal expectations do not demand anything greater. On the other hand, a person who lives by stronger standards usually approaches situations differently. Their effort does not depend entirely on convenience or emotion. Instead, their behavior is guided by the level of responsibility they have decided to maintain, regardless of the situation. Consider the person who decides that whatever task they are given will be completed carefully and fully. That person develops a habit of reliability and attention. When others begin noticing that habit, they naturally start trusting that person with greater responsibility. The opposite pattern also appears often. Someone may decide that doing the bare minimum is acceptable in most situations. They complete their responsibilities only enough to avoid criticism, and anything beyond that feels unnecessary. At first, this approach may seem efficient because it requires less effort. Yet over time, the results begin revealing the limits of that decision. When opportunities appear that require greater responsibility, people who have practiced minimal standards are often passed over. The reason is not that they lack ability, but that their past behavior has not shown the reliability others are looking for. Standards influence much more than professional situations. They also shape how someone manages their time, their habits, and their relationships. When a person decides that honesty, discipline, and consistency are non-negotiable parts of their character, those principles begin influencing decisions across every area of life. A person who maintains strong standards eventually becomes known for certain qualities. Others may say that this person can be trusted to finish what they start, prepare carefully, or remain dependable, even when situations become difficult. These reputations are not created through words, but through repeated actions that reflect the standards someone has chosen. Another person may have equal intelligence and ability, but operate with weaker expectations for themselves. They may allow promises to remain unfinished, accept careless work, or delay responsibilities until the last possible moment. Those habits may not appear disastrous at first, but over time they influence how others see their reliability. The world tends to respond to consistent behavior. When someone repeatedly demonstrates strong standards, people begin associating that person with trust and quality. Opportunities often follow people who have built that reputation because others feel confident relying on them. Standards influence how a person sees themselves. When someone consistently lives by disciplined behavior, they develop a sense of self-respect that strengthens their confidence. They know their actions match their intentions, and that alignment creates a strong base for future progress. Here is the other side of the coin. When someone repeatedly accepts lower expectations from themselves, a different internal experience may appear. They may start noticing that their actions do not match the goals they claim to value. Over time, that gap can weaken the confidence that normally comes from knowing one has done their best. One of the remarkable things about standards is that they are mostly voluntary. Circumstances may influence which opportunities appear, but each person ultimately decides the level of effort and responsibility they bring to those opportunities. No external rule can fully determine the personal standards someone chooses to maintain. This means two people placed in identical circumstances can produce very different results simply because their standards differ. One might approach the situation with discipline and preparation, while the other treats the same situation casually. The difference in outcomes often reflects the difference in expectations they set for themselves. standards reinforce themselves over time. When someone consistently meets higher expectations, they begin attracting situations that require those qualities. Responsibility increases, trust expands, and new opportunities begin appearing. Lower standards can create the opposite effect. If someone repeatedly demonstrates carelessness or inconsistency, fewer opportunities may appear because others hesitate to rely on behavior that seems unpredictable. The key realization is that standards are not permanent conditions assigned at birth. They are decisions that can be raised at any time. Someone who once accepted minimal expectations can choose stronger ones beginning today. Raising personal standards does not require dramatic announcements. It simply requires behaving differently in the ordinary moments when decisions are made. The next task can be completed with greater care. The next responsibility can be handled with stronger discipline. The next promise can be fulfilled with greater reliability. When those actions are repeated consistently, they begin forming a new pattern of behavior. That pattern becomes visible to others, and eventually it becomes part of the reputation a person carries. Progress often follows people who quietly raise the expectations they place on themselves. Regret, on the other hand, often appears when someone realizes they were capable of more, but allowed lower standards to guide their actions for too long. The decision about what standards to live by may appear private and invisible at first, yet over time, that decision becomes clearly visible through the results it produces. The quality of a person's future often reflects the level of expectations they chose to maintain in the ordinary moments of their life. Another decision that quietly separates progress from regret is the choice between action and delay. This decision appears often throughout life, usually in moments that seem ordinary and easy to overlook. A person recognizes something that should be done, understands that completing the task could improve their situation, and then must decide whether to begin now or postpone the effort. Delay has a way of making itself look reasonable. It rarely appears and openly admits that it is avoidance or neglect. Instead, it usually comes with small explanations that sound perfectly logical at the time. A person might tell themselves they will start tomorrow, next week, or when things feel a little more favorable. At first, this choice seems harmless. Putting something off for a short time does not immediately change the direction of a life. But when delay becomes a habit instead of an occasional exception, something subtle begins happening in the background. Every time someone postpones something important, the mind becomes a little more comfortable with postponing things. What once felt like a temporary delay slowly turns into a familiar response to effort. Over time, the habit of waiting begins replacing the habit of acting. This pattern quietly affects the opportunities that appear in a person's life. Many opportunities do not stay open forever. They appear quietly, present a moment where action could begin and eventually move on if nothing happens. Think about someone who decides they want to improve their abilities in a certain field. The first step might be studying a subject, practicing a skill, or speaking with people who already have experience in that area. None of these steps are beyond the reach of an ordinary person. Yet that person might delay getting started. They may think they need more time before beginning, or that everything must be perfectly prepared before the first step can happen. Weeks pass, then months, and eventually the intention remains while the action never actually begins. Meanwhile, another person with the same interests may simply start. Their early attempts may be imperfect, and they may feel uncertain at times along the way. But their decision to act creates something important that delay never produces: experience. Experience is a powerful teacher. When someone begins taking action, they start learning things that cannot be understood through thinking alone. Mistakes reveal useful information. Successes reveal possibilities. And each step forward slowly improves their understanding. This process builds momentum. The person who acts gains confidence through experience, and that confidence encourages further action. Each step forward makes the next step easier, because the person is no longer standing at the beginning. Delay interrupts this process before it can even start. Someone who repeatedly postpones action stays at the starting point, where uncertainty feels the strongest. Because no experience has been gained, the task continues looking harder than it may actually be. Momentum is one of the most valuable forces in personal progress. Once movement begins, it becomes easier to keep going. A person who takes steady action gradually develops a rhythm that allows them to accomplish more than they originally expected. And the habit of action makes effort visible too. When someone begins working toward a goal, other people start noticing what they are doing. That attention can lead to advice, encouragement, or opportunities that may never have appeared otherwise. Delay often prevents those connections from forming. When effort stays hidden inside plans and intentions, the world has very little chance to respond. Ideas remain private thoughts instead of actions that can influence circumstances. Another interesting thing about action is that it often clarifies direction. Many people hesitate because they believe they must see the entire path before starting. In reality, the path usually becomes clear only after the first steps are taken. Someone who acts begins discovering what works and what does not. They adjust their direction based on what they learn and gradually improve their efforts as experience builds. Without action, that discovery never happens. This is why delay can quietly take years from a person's life. It encourages the belief that everything must be perfectly prepared before beginning. Even though most progress comes from imperfect action followed by improvement. The difference between people who move forward and those who remain stuck is often surprisingly small. It is not always talent, intelligence, or resources that determine the outcome. Very often the difference is simply the willingness to begin while the opportunity still exists. Action does not guarantee immediate success, but it does guarantee movement. Movement creates experience, experience builds skill, and skill eventually produces results that would never have appeared without the first step. Delay produces the opposite effect. When someone repeatedly postpones important actions, the conditions that might have supported progress slowly disappear. Opportunities change, circumstances shift, and the moment that once existed eventually passes. The encouraging part of this idea is that the habit of action can be built just like any other habit. A person can start by deciding that when something useful needs to be done, the first step will be taken as soon as it reasonably can be. That choice begins training the mind to respond differently to opportunity. Instead of looking for reasons to wait, the person begins looking for the simplest way to begin. Even a small action can create the movement needed to start momentum. Over time, this habit becomes part of a person's character. Others begin seeing them as someone who takes initiative and follows through on their intentions. Opportunities often move toward people who show that kind of reliability. The difference between progress and regret often appears in those quiet moments when someone must decide whether to begin now or postpone the effort. The person who repeatedly chooses action slowly builds a life filled with movement and experience. The one who repeatedly chooses delay may eventually realize that the opportunities they once planned to pursue have quietly moved out of reach. In many cases, the distance between those two outcomes was created by a single decision, repeated again and again. The choice to act or the choice to wait. As the years pass, the choices a person makes start forming a pattern that becomes easier to see. At first, Each decision may seem separate from the others, like individual moments that do not carry much long-term importance. But when those decisions are viewed together over time, they begin revealing the direction a life has quietly taken. Someone who consistently chooses learning, responsibility, and effort slowly creates a future that reflects those priorities. Skills improve, understanding grows, and the ability to handle larger opportunities begins developing naturally. Progress does not appear all at once, but it grows steadily as the results of those choices add up. Another person may make different choices during the same period of time. They might avoid preparation when effort feels inconvenient, postpone actions that require discipline, or accept circumstances without trying to influence them. Those decisions also accumulate, shaping a future that reflects the direction those habits have created. Eventually, the distance between these paths becomes obvious. The person who invested in growth and responsibility begins experiencing opportunities that did not exist before. Their preparation allows them to recognize possibilities and respond to them with confidence. The other person may begin wondering why life unfolded differently than they once expected. They may remember ideas they planned to pursue, skills they once hoped to learn, or responsibilities they believed they would eventually accept. Yet those intentions remained plans instead of actions, and time continued moving forward. Regret rarely arrives all at once. Most of the time, it develops slowly as someone begins noticing the opportunities that once existed, but were never fully pursued. They may realize that certain doors were open at one time, but gradually closed because the necessary preparation or effort never happened. What makes this realization difficult is that those opportunities often looked ordinary when they first appeared. They did not look like major turning points that would shape the direction of a life. They simply looked like chances to begin learning, improving, or contributing in some useful way. The person who chose to act during those moments may not have recognized their importance either. They simply decided to take responsibility for the opportunity in front of them and do something useful with it. Over time, those decisions built experience, reputation, and ability that slowly expanded their possibilities. The important lesson is that the future is rarely created by a single extraordinary moment. It is built through the steady accumulation of decisions that either move someone forward or leave them standing in the same place. Each decision adds something to the direction that eventually becomes clear years later. Someone who understands this connection gains something valuable: the ability to influence tomorrow through the decisions made today. No one can rewrite the past, but every person can influence what happens next by changing the pattern of choices guiding their behavior. This realization can actually be encouraging. Even if someone recognizes that past decisions did not produce the results they hoped for, the future has not been permanently decided. The same principle that allowed past choices to shape the present can also allow new choices to shape what comes next. If repeated delay once created stagnation, repeated action can begin creating progress. If low standards once limited results, stronger standards can begin improving them. If comfort once guided daily decisions, choosing growth can begin expanding what becomes possible. The future is not a mystery assigned randomly. It is a direction that grows from the habits and choices a person repeats consistently. When those choices encourage learning, effort, and responsibility, the results slowly begin reflecting that commitment. One of the most powerful ideas someone can understand is that tomorrow is already being built by the decisions made today. the habits practiced this week, the effort invested this month, and the responsibilities accepted this year all contribute to the kind of future that will eventually appear. Regret often comes from realizing that those choices were handled carelessly or delayed for too long. Progress comes from recognizing that each decision carries influence and choosing actions that move life in a constructive direction. Once someone becomes aware of this relationship, everyday decisions begin carrying more meaning. Time becomes more valuable because it is understood as the material used to build the future. Effort becomes more important because it shapes the abilities that will define tomorrow's opportunities. The path ahead is rarely determined by chance alone. It is shaped through the accumulation of decisions that either strengthen a person's abilities or leave them unchanged. Those decisions appear quietly in the ordinary moments of each day. Every choice moves a person slightly closer to the life they want to build or slightly farther away from it. The movement may be small at first and almost invisible while it is happening. But over the years, those small movements become the difference between progress that was built intentionally and regret that developed through inaction. Understanding this truth gives every person a powerful advantage. It means the future is not completely outside their influence. It means today's choices can begin shaping tomorrow's possibilities. The decisions that separate progress from regret are rarely dramatic. They are the quiet choices made in ordinary moments, repeated often enough to guide the direction of a life. When those choices begin pointing toward growth, responsibility, and consistent action, the future gradually begins reflecting the wisdom of those decisions. Understanding grows, and the ability to handle larger opportunities begins developing naturally. Progress does not appear all at once, but it grows steadily as the results of those choices add up. Another person may make different choices during the same period of time. They might avoid preparation when effort feels inconvenient, postpone actions that require discipline, or accept circumstances without trying to influence them. Those decisions also accumulate, shaping a future that reflects the direction those habits have created. Eventually, the distance between these paths becomes obvious. The person who invested in growth and responsibility begins experiencing opportunities that did not exist before. Their preparation allows them to recognize possibilities and respond to them with confidence. The other person may begin wondering why life unfolded differently than they once expected. They may remember ideas they planned to pursue, skills they once hoped to learn, or responsibilities they believed they would eventually accept. Yet those intentions remained plans instead of actions, and time continued moving forward. Regret rarely arrives all at once. Most of the time, it develops slowly as someone begins noticing the opportunities that once existed, but were never fully pursued. They may realize that certain doors were open at one time, but gradually closed because the necessary preparation or effort never happened. What makes this realization difficult is that those opportunities often looked ordinary when they first appeared. They did not look like major turning points that would shape the direction of a life. They simply looked like chances to begin learning, improving, or contributing in some useful way. The person who chose to act during those moments may not have recognized their importance either. They simply decided to take responsibility for the opportunity in front of them and do something useful with it. Over time, those decisions built experience, reputation, and ability that slowly expanded their possibilities. The important lesson is that the future is rarely created by a single extraordinary moment. It is built through the steady accumulation of decisions that either move someone forward or leave them standing in the same place. Each decision adds something to the direction that eventually becomes clear years later. Someone who understands this connection gains something valuable: the ability to influence tomorrow through the decisions made today. No one can rewrite the past, but every person can influence what happens next by changing the pattern of choices guiding their behavior. This realization can actually be encouraging. Even if someone recognizes that past decisions did not produce the results they hoped for, the future has not been permanently decided. The same principle that allowed past choices to shape the present can also allow new choices to shape what comes next. If repeated delay once created stagnation, repeated action can begin creating progress. If low standards once limited results, stronger standards can begin improving them. If comfort once guided daily decisions, choosing growth can begin expanding what becomes possible. The future is not a mystery assigned randomly. It is a direction that grows from the habits and choices a person repeats consistently. When those choices encourage learning, effort, and responsibility, the results slowly begin reflecting that commitment. One of the most powerful ideas someone can understand is that tomorrow is already being built by the decisions made today, the habits practiced this week, the effort invested this month, and the responsibilities accepted this year all contribute to the kind of future that will eventually appear. Regret often comes from realizing that those choices were handled carelessly or delayed for too long. Progress comes from recognizing that each decision carries influence and choosing actions that move life in a constructive direction. Once someone becomes aware of this relationship, everyday decisions begin carrying more meaning. Time becomes more valuable because it is understood as the material used to build the future. Effort becomes more important because it shapes the abilities that will define tomorrow's opportunities. The path ahead is rarely determined by chance alone. It is shaped through the accumulation of decisions that either strengthen a person's abilities or leave them unchanged. Those decisions appear quietly in the ordinary moments of each day. Every choice moves a person slightly closer to the life they want to build or slightly farther away from it. The movement may be small at first and almost invisible while it is happening. But over the years, those small movements become the difference between progress that was built intentionally and regret that developed through inaction. Understanding this truth gives every person a powerful advantage. It means the future is not completely outside their influence. It means today's choices can begin shaping tomorrow's possibilities. The decisions that separate progress from regret are rarely dramatic. They are the quiet choices made in ordinary moments, repeated often enough to guide the direction of a life. When those choices begin pointing toward growth, responsibility, and consistent action, the future gradually begins reflecting the wisdom of those decisions.
I begin each day with discipline, clear purpose, integrity, and gratitude. I focus only on what I can influence, and I take deliberate action daily. I reflect, journal, and learn from each day so I improve tomorrow. I learn and teach every day, sharpening my judgment and understanding. I show up intentionally as a husband, a father, a son, and a brother. I take responsibility for the impact of my decisions on others. I train my body daily with discipline and respect for long-term health. I am becoming a capable managing director who understands business. I am building long-term financial stability through competence and integrity. I act with gratitude, humility, and a commitment to give back. I am becoming someone who does high-intensity interval training every single week. I take time to recognize what I am grateful for every day. I visualize success every day so I know what I'm moving towards. I begin each day with discipline, clear purpose, integrity, and gratitude. I focus only on what I can influence, and I take deliberate action daily. I reflect, journal, and learn from each day so I improve tomorrow. I learn and teach every day, sharpening my judgment and understanding. I show up intentionally as a husband, a father, a son, and a brother. I take responsibility for the impact of my decisions on others. I train my body daily with discipline and respect for long-term health. I am becoming a capable managing director who understands business. I am building long-term financial stability through competence and integrity. I act with gratitude, humility, and a commitment to give back. I am becoming someone who does high-intensity interval training every single week. I take time to recognize what I am grateful for every day. I visualize success every day so I know what I'm moving towards. I begin each day with discipline, clear purpose, integrity, and gratitude. I focus only on what I can influence, and I take deliberate action daily. I reflect, journal, and learn from each day so I improve tomorrow. I learn and teach every day, sharpening my judgment and understanding. I show up intentionally as a husband, a father, a son, and a brother. I take responsibility for the impact of my decisions on others. I train my body daily with discipline and respect for long-term health. I am becoming a capable managing director who understands business. I am building long-term financial stability through competence and integrity. I act with gratitude, humility, and a commitment to give back. Day 109.